Hello everyone and happy Monday. Today I have a wonderful surprise for all of you guys, a highly requested video that you guys have been asking me to do. A lot of people have been sending me this request in the DMs and sending me links and saying, hey Savvy, did you hear about this? And I found out that my friend Emma Thorne, a lot of people were sending her very similar things, and a couple people actually tagged us both in this on Twitter. So we decided, hey, why not just make this video together? So today you guys are going to get a wonderful video collaboration as Emma and I together review this book called Ladies First, a MAGA hat romance. Ladies First is the story of a young feminist named Ricky who wants nothing more than to join a prestigious feminist organization. She decides to go to a Trump rally in order to write a blog post about how awful everyone at the Trump rally is so that she can write this blog post and impress the feminist club. But while she's at the rally, she's shocked that all of Trump's supporters are just such nice, amazing, and kind people. Meanwhile, it is her awful leftist Antifa supporters that come in to protest and create violence and havoc. And while she's there, right in the throes of danger, she is rescued by a big, strong, Trump-supporting man named Mike with a big, beefy, strong truck. But little does she know that she's soon going to fall in love with him. Is it worth giving up her feminist convictions to find true love with a large, beefy man with a beefy truck? I don't know. Let's read today and find out.
Hit you some nuts.
There was lots of memes.
Makes me wonder if I should take up lesbianism.
Chicago.
You guys asked for it.
This video is gonna be wild. As of the time I'm recording this intro, we actually just finished our very long book discussion of this, and because we're in such different time zones, even while we were finishing for Emma, it was late afternoon because she's in the UK, and for me in Chicago, it was still like early part of the day. So she was getting ready to have dinner, and I'm getting ready to have breakfast. Oh look, it's cereal. I'm gonna eat that for breakfast. Is this maybe from today's sponsor? Today's video is sponsored by Magic Spoon, a high-protein, low-carb brand of fun breakfast cereals with a variety of tasty flavors. Magic Spoon cereals have been with me throughout my entire process of getting back into working out during my surgery recovery. I'm now back at the gym with my trainer once a week, plus working out at home again, and it's been super important to me to get extra protein into my meals every day. So starting the day off with a high-protein breakfast feels amazing and gets me on the right track every day. Magic Spoon cereals have 0 grams of sugar, 13 to 14 grams of protein, and only 4 net grams of carbs per serving. They also have about 140 calories per serving and are keto-friendly, gluten-free, grain-free, soy-free, and low-carb. You can build your very own variety box and choose from Magic Spoon's best-selling cocoa, fruity, frosted, peanut butter, cookies and cream, maple waffle, blueberry, and cinnamon, plus the newly reformulated honey nut flavor that will now be added to the Magic Spoon permanent collection. Lately, I've been loving eating the fruity flavor, and since Magic Spoon recently sent me a box of the new honey nut flavor, I'm really starting to enjoy that one as well. It's delicious, guys. So click the link below to get some Magic Spoon cereal. You can build your very own variety box and use my code SAVVY for $5 off. And since Magic Spoon is now adding honey nut to their permanent collection, make sure to add that to your custom box and try it out as well. Magic Spoon is so confident in their product that it's backed with a 100% happiness guarantee. So if you don't like it for any reason at all, they'll refund you your money, no questions asked. And also for my Canadian and British viewers, don't forget, Magic Spoon is also now shipping to Canada and to the UK. So click the link below and use the code SAVVY for $5 off, or go to magicspoon.com/savvy to save $5 on your order today. Thank you again to Magic Spoon for sponsoring this video. Thank you also to all of my Patreon supporters. You can check out in the description below that Patreon supporters who support for $5 a month and up can link their own channel, social media, or small business in the description below, so please go check them out as well. Now, on to our review and book discussion. Hello, what's up my fellow small business supporters? Today I'm here with my good friend, Emma. I love it when we collab. You're one of my favorite people to collab with, so thanks for collabing again.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I'm excited about the collab, I'm excited about the content.
Today we are going to be reviewing Ladies First, a MAGA hat romance novel by Liberty Adams. So as you guys can see, this is, there is got a man and a woman falling in love in front of an American flag with a Make America Great Again hat on the ground next to them. We're going to kind of go through it chapter by chapter. We're going to have a piece of each of this review on each of our channels, so if you are enjoying this review and you want to see the review of the rest of the book, you'll want to head to Emma's channel, where I believe she will have the review up about on Wednesday. So check that out, guys. But this is what the book is about, for those of you who are curious. When Patriot Mike rescues feminist Ricky, and Ricky is a woman. I know Ricky sounds usually like a male name, but Ricky's a woman in this case.
Ricky with an I. Yeah.
Ricky with an I, yeah. When he rescues her from a post-Trump rally riot, the clash of opposites sets off sparks between them, but the gentleman giant refuses to leave the side of the spunky half-pint until he and his pickup truck deliver her home safe and sound. Ricky attends the rally to scoop the racism of the Trump crowd in a blog post, but she's forced to spin a false narrative when her mistaken assumptions fail to materialize. When Ricky's lies get Mike doxxed and his construction worksite becomes a target of anti-fascist thugs, his righteous anger forces her to reckon with the truth. Ricky wants to fix the damage and regain Mike's trust, but that means... But that means facing the wrath of the liberal mobs. Will Ricky find the courage to leave the left for a lifetime of old-fashioned true love?
The whole book as well.
I think our first question going into this book was, is this genuine or is this author trolling?
Especially because there's a dedication at the beginning and a dedication at the, or like a thank you. This is to all MAGA patriots. I love you guys. You're keeping America alive. I'm a proud mom and wife, all this stuff. And I'm like, so my kind of thought was like, either it's a troll and it's a brilliant troll by someone who is like quite nuanced in their writing and has done a lot of research, or it is someone that's like so deeply entrenched in Trumpism that they don't realize what a cliche they are. And if it's real, I cannot believe that it's written by a woman.
It might not be. This is clearly, she says it's a pen name, so it could be written by a man.
She does describe herself as like a mother and a wife and stuff like that. At the end, there's like a teaser text for the book 2 as well. And even in the tiny, tiny bit of teaser text, like, the female character is awful. The character is so woman-hating. And, like, the men are just so good and kind to put up with how awful the women are. I just think it can't have been a genuine Trump-supporting woman, you know?
Here's a couple things that made me think maybe this is a troll. So the dedication says, the series is dedicated to MAGA patriots everywhere. That feels like a little too on the nose. I don't know.
Yeah.
And then... the acknowledgements is for friends, family, fellow writers, critics, and coaches who helped me, and for President Trump, whose MAGA movement inspired this series.
That's why I can't tell if it's, like, really good research and a really well-done character, because they are in character, if it is a character, outside of the book as well, like, responding to reviews and things. I think it was, like, TDS, and it was, like, showing the 1-star reviews on Amazon, and it was like, this is... Trump delusion disorder, where they can't think logically. And it's like, that's either really good maintaining the character, or some people really are like that.
And that's why I'm like wondering, because this could be like a Chuck Tingle type of thing. Like, I've reviewed Chuck Tingle books on this channel before, and we've talked about, like, Chuck Tingle stays in character all the time. Like, he does full, like, Reddit AMA threads where he'll just, like, do the most ridiculous off-the-wall things, and, like, he's in character 100% of the time. So I'm wondering, like, is this person trying to do that or something? Like, I could see if, like, because doing this is, like, so, like, writing something controversial that's going to get a lot of attention is going to get a lot of book sales, and you could make a lot of money being a troll in this kind of way. Like, it's really, you really could. So, I get it. The thing that makes me think maybe this isn't a troll is in the back it says, here's a preview of book 2 in the MAGA Hat romance series, and this book sounds more like a regular romance novel and less like something that's a troll job. Like, it's like, or 4 years ago, Allie was left widowed with a newborn infant to raise. For the sake of their daughter, Allie honors her husband's memory by being a super mom and rejecting all relationships and dating. But on a family cruise, she finds herself in the presence of the handsome, eligible ship's doctor more than she would like. And then it's like talking about the ship's doctor, and this just sounds like a romance novel. And I'm like, this isn't about Trump. This isn't about, like, two people trying to, like, someone giving up their views or their convictions for someone else. Like, this is really seems to be like just a regular romance. And so I'm like, if she's writing that and saying that this has like a conservative family values message to it, I'm wondering, like, maybe she's not a troll. Maybe she just wanted to have a really
It's so hard
explosive first book to get the attention off the ground.
I struggle to understand how that relates as book 2 of this series, because it's different characters, a totally different sort of premise, and like you said, the same sort of themes.
Maybe it's in the same universe. I don't know.
Maybe. The other thing that I thought that led me slightly more down the troll angle, they talk about Antifa as the villain quite a lot, but quite often say the full anti-fascist. Because I think a lot of the kind of MAGA crowd tend to say Antifa and try to refer to that as a specific organization rather than like an anti-fascist movement. So, but then that would be sort of almost slipping out of character, and I just don't know.
For example, okay, we'll go through this book because I marked some places where I'm like, this could be trolling here, and then other places where I'm like, well, this is pretty big dedication if it is. Like, so guys, let us know in the comments below if you think, after we fully review this, if this is a troll book or if this author is serious. Let us know, because I'm a little bit all over the place with this. Okay, so chapter 1 starts with Ricky she is a young feminist with green hair and dark lipstick, and that's how we know that she's cringe. And she's on the train. Okay, this was something I maybe thought was a troll, but I'm not sure. So the author keeps calling the transit, she keeps calling it the trolley or the line. Is that a British thing?
Well, I thought it was an American thing, because this is set in America.
Right, but I'm like, I never hear it called that.
I imagined it as like a subway.
Okay, that's why I didn't know. I thought maybe this is a British author who's trolling Americans, because I was like, I've never heard someone call it the trolley or the line. But then I posted about it, and some people said that like some people in Boston call it the line. So, okay. I don't know.
It's like specific to wherever this takes. I don't think they explicitly say, do they? I don't remember them saying.
I don't think they say where it takes place, so it could be a regional dialect difference, because at first I'm like, ooh, this is not American, and then I'm like, oh, well, maybe it is. It's just not Midwest. We don't say it that way here. Okay, well, never mind. It's not British then. We've confirmed. Okay.
No.
Ricky is on the line or the trolley or the subway, the train. She's on that, heading off to a Trump rally, and her goal is that she wants to join a feminist organization, and it's kind of like a fraternity, sorority type of thing where you have to get initiated, and in order to join the feminist organization, she has to write a blog post about the Trump rally and expose how awful it is. So she's on a train to go do that.
They literally meet like at the very beginning. So, I'm sorry, I've got a note on like the second sentence. She adjusted the waistband of her low-slung jeans. This is the only thing we find out about Ricky's appearance for like 4 chapters. No,
yeah.
And she's never describe another woman who has nothing to do with the plot that she's just looking at the Trump rally.
Oh yeah, I made a note. I said, this is gay, I ship them.
Yeah, right?
She watched one woman in particular, olive-complected. She had coal-black hair pulled into a tight knot, large eyes, heavily lined in kohl, and sensual full lips. She was tall and shapely, beautiful, and very tough-looking. And I'm like, this maybe is a troll, because I'm like, this girl's hot, dude. Like, this is gay.
I was like, okay, so they can describe character. What Ricky looks like, other than the fact that she's wearing low-slung jeans. That's all I know. You do get a bit more later, but like for now, you're just like I'm just imagining like a pair of jeans trying to get on the.
This is a sentient pair of pants walking around. Wondering if she's intentionally not describing her because she wants the audience to project their image of the archetypal feminist onto her. Yeah.
Yeah, that might make sense, because I'm guessing just because A, traditional values, and B, romance in general, I'm guessing it's written for a female audience. I couldn't really say for sure from this, but yeah, so she's like trying to get on the train, and she's like all stoked about this Trump rally, but it's like super busy, and I'm like, yep, central line of rush hour, I feel it, this is a mood, it's stressful. And then this guy appears, who is Mike, obviously the main male protagonist. We don't know that yet. And she's like, ugh, a redneck.
Ugh, that's part of what made me think is like, I'm thinking, what is the audience this is written for? Is this written for young women who have conservative values, who like to see other women follow their path? Or is it written for people like us to review and give it a bad review so it'll get more publicity and more people will hate read it?
I had a good time reading it because it was so over the top.
It was so funny, dude!
Yeah, and it's just like, she's the worst. Like, through a lot of it, especially our introduction to her, she sees people and she instantly judges them and she hates them, and none of her beliefs come from like research or her own interests. It's all like, oh well, you know, whatever, the world is telling me to be like this, which is also such a like MAGA style cliche.
Well, it's like when we talked about Girl Defined, it's like the culture. They always talk about the culture and the counterfeit femininity, and that's like, yeah, exactly.
She's literally like, she's like trying to get on the train and sort of thinking to herself, and in her brain she's like, according to fourth wave feminism. And I was like, that's not what women are like. That's why I was like, this has got to, if it's real, it's got to be a male author, because there's no that's not what feminists, that's not how feminists make like moral decisions. By being like, well, according to the specific aspect of feminism, modern feminism, and the only time I ever hear like fourth wave or even third wave or whatever is anti-feminists talking about it.
Ah, a redneck, the kind that drew her automatic disdain. For good measure, she used the toe of one of his steel-capped work boots as a stepping stone and set her elbow in the vicinity of his ribcage. Men like this only existed in the world of her father and brother, who were holdouts to a version of masculinity that was rapidly disappearing. According to fourth wave feminism, most of the rest should have been reduced to blithering apologetics by now. And part of me's like, it's like, can someone write this way genuinely? That's where maybe this is trolling. Just because I know people watch me for this, I tried to critique the writing itself a little bit. Mm-hmm. So, for example, later down on that page, we have a lot of issues with there being, whether it's third person limited or omniscient in terms of the point of view, kind of shifts a lot even within the same paragraph. And like, the way I originally, like, the way a lot of romance novels do it is they'll do third-person limited, but switch who the limited perspective is from each of the ends, like, each romantic partner. It'll switch kind of their experience, but it'll stay limited for their perspective for that paragraph, at least, or often that whole chapter.
I just want to, like, as, like, just the experience of someone who gets, like, the Central Line in London at rush hour to work. Mm-hmm. He's, like... So for her, basically he's doing like a redneck chivalry thing. He's like blocking so she can get on the train, and then he's blocking people so she can have the last seat. It says like he continued to block the swell of commuters, and I'm like, how? Unless he's like as wide as the train. And
he's supposed to be like big.
Fit dude, he's like meant to be big, but like he'd have to be like a giant square to actually there's no way that seat's still empty. Like
well, this kind of reminded me, have you seen there's this video by Jenny Nicholson where she reviews this book called Trigger Warning?
No,
and okay, this book is like, there's this main character Jake. It's kind of like, I think it's more like it seems less of trolling than this one does. It is like this guy, it's about this like guy who's ex-military and goes to college when he's older than most college students because he got out of the military, and everyone in college is too soft and sensitive, and he needs to bring some real masculinity back to college and win the ladies over that way. That's what it's about. But the guy he's big and muscular, and the book tells you that like every page. It's like, Jake was so big. He was so big. And that he was so much bigger than everyone else. He couldn't believe how small everyone was because he was so big. It just kept bringing up how big he was. Like, that's how this book is with, like, I think that's the thing. They want to bring up the size difference. It's constantly like, Mike was big. He was a giant square. He was just a giant fucking rectangle that blocked everything. And Ricky was small. She was a little small bean. She was just she was a little ooh-woo tiny baby. Yeah.
It's an amazing, my favorite bit of this chapter, I haven't even written any notes here, I just highlighted it because it just made me laugh. Right, this is her. Oh, so she's like, I don't want to sit. I found this kind of weird and annoying, by the way. So he's like trying to get her to sit in this empty seat. Mm-hmm. And she's like, no, and so this other regular commuter she knows, Harold, you mentioned earlier, she's like, yeah, you sit down, go on, Harold.
Harold sat with his knees closed, the very image of detoxed masculinity.
I don't know what that means.
So part of me was like, A, this either has to be trolling, or B, this is actually, could be an example of getting out of the third person limited point of view, because if we're in Ricky's point of view, Ricky, who is in the feminist mindset, would not think like, that is detoxed masculinity. This man is not masculine enough because his legs are closed. In her feminist perspective, she would probably just think, Harold's just sitting on the train. But that's not what she thinks, so I don't know.
She does, it makes a point of pointing out that he asked her out once and she thinks he's, like, disgusting. So there might be some, like, this would be quite nuanced, which is why I struggle to understand what kind of author it is. Could almost be like, you know, the feminist thing is a facade, and deep down this, like, non-masculine guy disgusts her. I don't know.
Well, I think that is kind of what it is, because she falls in love with Mike because he's big and thick and masculine and huge.
He's bloody huge.
And Harold, who sits with his legs closed, is too much of a little beta cuck, and she doesn't like boys like that because she's a real woman.
Somebody on the train shouts loser. And it's like, is that somebody shouting loser at Harold?
Poor Harold!
Like she'd spent her entire graduation program perfecting the art of rejecting men. In this, her final semester, she could, and sometimes did, give lessons in it. It's like, what? And then, as a feminist about to graduate with a master's degree in gender studies, which I don't know if that exists. You tell
Maybe
me.
if you want to become a gender studies professor, it probably exists.
I guess so.
Yeah.
So master's degree in gender studies, dating was a mark of shame, and I was like, the whole mark, like.
I've marked that line because it has a misplaced
studies
modifier.
Oh
like,
no.
Yeah, as a
Like,
feminist about to
shame.
graduate with a master's degree in gender studies. Who's the feminist about to graduate? Ricky is. So it should have been, as a feminist
you're
about to
right.
graduate with a master's degree in gender studies, Ricky saw dating as a mark of shame. But dating, now it sounds like dating is about to graduate. The concept of dating is about to get a master's degree in gender studies.
Maybe
which,
it is.
Maybe it is. Maybe that's what this book is all about. I don't know.
This is my favorite piece of dialogue from Mike for the entire book, right? He's trying to get her to sit there. It's a whole big debacle. He's trying to get her to sit in this seat. And she's like, no. Harold sits down, and she's like, hey, Harold. And he goes, "Ha-uh," he said. "You defile the memory of my grandfather." Because she didn't want to sit on the train. I was like, I get knee pain if I sit down for too long, and sometimes I want to stand.
I once had this conversation with my dad, because my dad is kind of a masculine man who thinks about manliness in old-fashioned kind of ways sometimes. And so he asked me, like, you know, do people give up seats for you on the train ever? And I said, like, you know, people give up seats for pregnant women and for elderly people or disabled people, or, like, people who give up a seat if there's someone that they think has a physical reason that they would need to sit. He was like, well, do people ever give up seats for you? I'm like, why would they? And he's like, because you're a woman. And that made me think, and I was like, first of all, I didn't even pick up, because I'm so bad at social cues, so I didn't even pick up that people might be doing that. And it just made me think of this one time that someone did give me their seat on the train. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know that people just did that because of a gender thing. Because I was on the train one day, or I'm riding on the bus, and some dude on the bus is like, would you like my seat? And I immediately thought, like, okay, I know I look like shit today, but do I look elderly? Because, like, I know, like, you usually give up for elderly or pregnant women. I'm like, I'm a little bit bloated. Like, do I look pregnant? Like, holy shit, what does he think? And I just started having, like, all these kinds of, like, body dysmorphic issues. Because I'm like, does he think I'm old or pregnant? What does he think? And then I later was like, oh my god, maybe men do just give up seats for women sometimes. I just didn't know that. So now that I know that, I was like, oh, maybe, but this man had me thinking that I was an elderly pregnant woman this whole time, that I looked elderly and pregnant. I was like, I'm just bloated and my face looks bad today. Calm down.
I'll give up, you know, if there's only other younger people I don't want to sit, then I'll be like, do you want my seat? And if they say no, I'm not going to be like, you have defiled my grandfather's honor. I expected, okay, this is not related specifically to this chapter, apart from the defile my memory thing. They talk about specifically grandfathers and grandparents so much throughout this book, and I expected it to go somewhere, like they would have this thing where Mike's like, oh, my grandfather fought in the war and I loved him and I lost him to... I thought there would be something out of it. Nothing. They just randomly talk about their grandparents, like, all the time, but they never talk about them. They just talk about how their grandparents had the best values in the world, and it never, like, comes to anything. I just found it super weird. I was like, there's got to be a payoff somewhere in this book.
Yeah.
The granddad thing. I think he just really loves his granddad. I don't know.
I think I'm just gonna headcanon that this author is an old lady whose grandkids don't talk to her anymore, and she can't figure out why. So she just writes characters who love their grandparents.
Oh, and this chapter 1 also gives us the phrase "juicy man hate."
Juicy man hate! Juicy man hate. She might need this guy later. He'd already furnished her with some juicy man hate fodder for the blog post she planned to write.
Yeah.
Juicy man hate. That's gonna be my band name.
I mean, to be honest, if I had a blog, I would be. I do have a blog. I have a blog. Like, if somebody on the train said to me, "You defiled a memory of my grandfather," I would be like, "This is some quality shit. I'm gonna write about this."
I mean, if someone says weird shit like that to me on the train every day, if you regularly ride, like, so if you're a person who lives in Chicago and doesn't have a car like I am, and you're regularly on transit, people say the weirdest shit to you all day, every day. Like, you're just used to stuff that's weirder than that already. Like,
True.
I'm used to, like, you know, people just, like, walking up to, like, Tyler and being like, "Is she with you?" Yeah, okay, never mind. Going up to another guy and being like, "Is she with you?" Like, I'm used to people like that on the train. People who go on, like, long manifestos. One time Tyler was stuck on a bus with this woman who was talking about how Trump used to be a good guy back before the aliens got him, and she had this, like, whole, like, headcanon about how Trump was, like, a good guy because she remembered when she was a kid, she was kidnapped by the Ku Klux Klan, and Trump saved her from the Ku Klux Klan by shooting them with his gun. But then Trump got abducted by aliens, and they mind controlled him to become evil. So we heard a whole story about that on the bus once. So my point is, someone saying you defile the memory of my grandfather to be on the bus or the train, I'd probably be like,
not that weird.
Yeah, it's like some of the less weird stuff I would have heard. So I'd be like, okay.
We also get a nice description of Mike here. He's trim and fit, despite his size. I don't know what that means. Is it saying that he's, like, huge, but he's got, like, a little waist? Is that the implication? I can't quite work it out.
I think the idea is that she's trying to say he's huge, but he's not obese like those gross fat rights activists. Like, he's big, but he's big in a way that is strong and is all muscular, and he's big because he's just so beefy. But he's not big because he's fat, because he's not a lazy slob who eats all day. He is a man who works hard and builds up his body. I think that's what she's trying to say.
Okay, that makes sense.
It's like, I don't want you to confuse which type of big he is.
Which type of huge man he is.
Yeah, he's the kind of huge man that I personally like, is what I'm saying. Yeah.
And he's got working man's hands. His face was handsome. I just love that it's like, he's huge. His hands are huge. He's a huge, rugged, fit dude. And also his face was handsome.
Yeah, we don't get to know what his face looks like. It's handsome, trust me.
We know it's, his face is handsome in a rugged, not pretty way.
No, he's not, he wouldn't be in a boy band. He's not like that kind of dude. Those guys are weak. He wouldn't be like a weak boy band dude. Absolutely not.
She's like looking at him and thinking about how he looks this whole time. And then she, like, keeps going on about how the way he acts or looks reminds her of her dad, which I thought was quite weird.
That's incredibly weird. She's like, I'm gonna fall in love with this guy who looks like my dad.
Yeah, and she, like, keeps looking at him and can't look away, and she's like, "Oh, he's got the same haircut that I hate that my dad has." And then she goes off about thinking about how her dad is a hunter, and she's worried that the feminist group will find out that her dad's a hunter and like, kick her out. Which I thought was kind of weird.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure feminists can hunt too.
And it's like, she's so, well, yeah, she's, like, so worried about, it's not even her either, it's her dad.
If we know one thing about feminists, it's that they love to blame women for things that men in their life do, so obviously.
Yeah, for sure. And then she mentions that she's getting a tattoo soon that she's wanted her whole life and she's saved up for. And I put a note here, and I was noting as I read through the first time, so I put a note saying, I really hope she gets this because she's always wanted it, and it doesn't become some sort of like, she decides not to get it because Mike doesn't like tattoos. And now I'm, like, so sad reading back over my notes.
Oh, so I was so confused about the tattoo. So this book portrays the feminist group as a big cult because it's called the Sisterhood, and you have to get, like, initiated into it. And then it talks about how after you get initiated into the Sisterhood, you get to get a tattoo. So I assumed it was like a group cult tattoo. And then at the end, when she goes to get a tattoo, it's like a floral initial. It's like her initial R with flowers around it, which sounds very pretty, actually. But I'm like, I thought it was for the.
About it being feminine too.
I thought it was for the group. I thought the tattoo was for the, like, and how is the tattoo related to the group otherwise?
I think the tattoo actually doesn't relate to the group. not written very clearly. It also talks about having wanted it since she was 8 years old. And I
Oh, so maybe, it's like her,
clear.
it's like her thing is like, I'm gonna celebrate getting into the group by getting myself this tattoo I've wanted.
She's saved up enough money now. I think that's what it is.
Okay, I thought it was trying to say, like, this group's a cult where we get matching tattoos. I thought that's where it was. Yeah, it is a cult. And I thought that was interesting how she tried to juxtapose the cult commentary, which, things like this where her writing's good make me think, like, maybe this is a troll, because she's doing a good job here. Where she's, like, talks about the sisterhood and how she's gonna get a tattoo, and it's like sounds all culty, and then right after that she says, if nothing else, these red-clad cultists had enthusiasm on their side, like talking about people in the MAGA hats. So I'm like, oh, it's trying to juxtapose the cult commentary, like people say that Trump supporters are a cult, but also feminists are a cult. And I was like, that's an interesting commentary.
Kind of works, yeah.
It kind of works in the sense of how you're writing it, so...
See, I had a few moments throughout where I was like, this is kind of... and there's some stuff upcoming at the Trump rally that I thought was quite sort of clever, and I'm still just... I mean, it could be somebody genuine who is also, like, quite good at certain aspects of writing. It could be that too, but... It
could, yeah. There's, like, a whole lot of... options for what this could be. Chapter 2.
This takes place at the Trump rally, described as like laughing inwardly at the ignorance of the people around her. She's like desperately trying to find things to be judgmental about. She's supposed to be there to like talk about the bad attitudes of people at the Trump rally and MAGA people. She's very specifically looking for racism. She's like hunting for racists at this rally.
Yeah.
So that she can get into this cult. But surprise, surprise, she can't find any. She can't find a single
Everyone
racist.
is nice. Everyone at the Trump rally is so nice.
Kind and friendly, and they're so diverse. It's the most diverse gathering she's ever seen. Ricky has this huge problem for her blog because she can't even get any photos without minorities in the frame somewhere. She's struggling to get photos.
She's trying to get a whites-only photo and she can't.
So she basically decides she's going to have to lie and fabricate her story for the blog. So there's like a whole lot going on.
So there's this part where Ricky sits down next to this woman named Marilyn, who she describes as a trad wife. Yeah. And her describing her as a trad wife, again, made me wonder, like, is that a troll thing to say? I don't know. But this part, okay, so Marilyn's like, welcome, glad you came, hope you have fun. And Ricky's like, sure, it's great. And then it says, she wondered how she could ask the woman about blacks, gays, intersectionality. And I'm like...
so much.
So I'm like, that has to be trolling, right? Because, like, I don't know, I can't tell, because part of me is like, this could just be out of character in the third person limited, because if you're trying to do this from Ricky's perspective, would a feminist say blacks, gays, intersectionality?
About the blacks and the gays.
Right, absolutely not. Like, you wouldn't say that. They would probably say something like how we would talk about racial issues in the LGBTQ community, which is, I mean, this is also just interesting to look at how people say different things. This is one thing I talked about in my Ben Shapiro book review. When American ideology is so divided, people do develop different languages among different groups, so it almost becomes impossible to talk to each other, because you can say the same type of words but have a different implication by them, because it's almost like a different linguistic dialect. So when I look through this and I'm like, I mean, literally that is what she's trying to say, but like that's not something that someone would say who thinks that way. So I don't know.
She's talking about how the crowds here are so nice and calm and enthusiastic, but her own side, their crowds are always angry and they spill into violence. And I'm like, is that what happens at like Democrat rallies? I don't think that's true. And on the flip side, I was like, there's no way that like there's not a single racist at this massive event full of people.
How do you, it's like, how do you know? Can you read everyone's mind? Are you a mind reader now, Ricky? Can you read everyone's mind and see what they're thinking about everybody else at the group? Yeah. What do you mean there isn't a single race? You mean there isn't someone like loudly yelling racial slurs in your face? You don't know if maybe they're thinking something racist. You don't know.
But so I like this bit that describes her, and she's like, rage and anger had become driving forces in her life, expressed by her one cosmetic indulgence. So it's important for you to know that she doesn't wear too much makeup. Mm-hmm. But she wears black nail polish and black lipstick, and today her hair is green. She does like temporary, and it's like, oh, and the hair, green, her choice today, served the rage. And I was just like, green, the color most commonly associated with rage. Like, maybe if she had like red lipstick.
I was also, maybe this is just a me problem, but who has hair dye that can wash out in one day? Because even if you get temporary hair dye, usually it takes a couple days to wash out. Like, if you put in temporary hair dye, if you wash it out, even if your hair is, like, not that porous, it'll usually leave, like, some tint behind for a little bit. Like, it's, like, really hard to wash hair dye out in one day. So I'm like, what is she doing with this hair dye?
So it's, like, it's described as spray-in hair dye. And I'm like, I've used spray-in before, and I've done, like, when you use colder or darker colors, I've done, like, black spray on blonde before. It does, like you say, it leaves a tint for a while. And I was like, there's no way somebody with naturally, like, light blonde hair could spray it green and then go and quickly wash it out and it be perfectly blonde again. There's, like, it's gonna be like,
especially if you're blonde. Yeah, like, that's the thing. Like, when I had a couple years ago bleached my hair blonde, which I still do now. I bleached it really light blonde, and then I had put in 2 different colors of hair dye. I did, like, blue and purple, and the blue one faded green, and the green stuck there permanently, even though it wasn't supposed to. So it's like getting green out of blonde is really hard.
The fact that they chose green and that it then washes out instantly, this person's never dyed their hair green.
I'm like, this is an author who's like, if this author is serious, then she's someone who's like, I only like my natural beauty that God gave to me, and therefore I have never dyed my hair in my life. Which, to be fair, I used to be like that. I mean, I've never been that religious, but I used to be like, I love my natural beauty, and I refuse to ever dye my hair or wear makeup or anything because I want to get by on only exactly how I am by nature. And then later I realized that was stupid, and now I've had plastic surgery and shit. So, like, good for me, dude. That's an arc.
Yeah. I mean, that's very, like, that's the perspective of this book, right? Is that I think Mike specifically says it later on. He's like, you're defiling what God gave you, you know?
Yeah, it's what God gave you. Yep. Gotta have God.
There's this bit, she's like running around, well, not running, she's looking around this rally, trying to find racists, trying to find violence, trying to find something negative. She can't find a single person doing anything that could be considered vaguely bad anywhere, despite how many people there are. And she finds this, like, gun club.
The gun club.
And she goes over there and she's like, yes, this is great material.
Yes.
She goes over there and she's like, hey, can I buy an assault rifle? And they're just like, what do you mean? She's like pointing at this picture, and he's like, oh, that's an AR-15. And I was like, ooh, what a interesting political statement.
Yes.
Because the AR-15 is it's a semi-automatic rifle. And, it's like a civilian rifle, but it's got like a militaristic look. A lot of people really like just the aesthetics.
Right,
it's got a really complicated history because it's a weapon that has been used for a number of gun crimes and things like that. And there's been a lot of back and forth over whether there should be certain restrictions placed on the selling of these weapons. So it's a really interesting choice, I thought, because it kind of represents these two sort of camps and opposing viewpoints. At least this is what I read into it, where like a lot of people and the sort of Mike's like MAGA side of it would see the AR-15 as like a representation of American values and freedom and the right to bear arms. For the people like Ricky on that sort of more left-leaning side, it kind of represents like grotesque fascination with violence and problems with gun crime. And I thought that was a really interesting kind of choice for those two characters. But I also thought the fact that she says, I'd like to buy an assault rifle, and the guy says, what's an assault rifle? And like, clearly if you're a member or an owner or some kind of person involved in a gun club, you're going to know what an assault rifle is. You could be, if you're a 12-year-old who's played a video game in the US, then you know what an assault rifle is.
I think it was getting more into, there are a lot, I think this was a commentary kind of on the fact that, like, from what I've seen, there are a lot of left-leaning people who mistakenly think that AR-15, that the AR stands for assault rifle. When it doesn't. I think there's a lot of people who make that mistake, and I think that it was making fun of that mostly.
It might have been making fun of it. I also thought there's a part of it was the specific language being used when they were talking about trying to place restrictions on these weapons. The language was around restricting the sale of assault rifles. And so what a lot of people in the sort of pro AR-15 and related weapons camp would say, well, it's not an assault rifle. This isn't an assault rifle. We don't want anything to do with the association that this is an assault rifle. So I kind of thought maybe it's what's an assault rifle? We don't know what that is. We don't deal with that. We're not a part of that. Like almost a sort of distancing tactic. I could have read way too much into it. Kind of depends on who the author is.
Yeah, and that's what a lot of this book's meaning depends on the author's intention, yeah.
If it's satire, genuine kind of changes what the meaning behind that could be. But she spends the rest of the time walking around basically being like, well, darn it turns out there's no bad people at Trump rallies.
And everyone's really nice. Who knew?
It's almost a good moral on not holding black and white views, not painting an entire group with the same extreme brush, but it goes too far into silly, and it's everyone at this Trump rally is the nicest, coolest person, and I cannot find a single instance of racism or sex.
Well, part of me, this book got me wondering, and I was thinking, is it possible to write a opposite ends of the political spectrum romance and do it well? And I say this, I know a lot of people in the book community online think it's completely impossible, and I can see why they think that. I will admit this to you guys, because I try to be as honest as possible so that if you ever cancel me, I'll know it's coming. When I was an edgy kid in college, I wrote an opposite ends of the political spectrum romance. It's never gone anywhere, never published it, never did anything with it. Looking back on it, it really wasn't that good. But I've seen since then books that try to handle it, and I think that if you're going to do a political... First of all, when I wrote this, it was during the Obama-Romney election, which was a lot less divisive than anything with Trump involved. Yeah. So I think that... And it wasn't about... It wasn't about those people, but just the climate was different then. But on top of it, I think that if you're going... Here's my thought. I think it's very hard to do it well because in a lot of cases, a lot of people's political values tie directly to their moral and personal values. And if you have different moral and personal values, it's going to be really hard to have a relationship. However, it depends if your political differences are based on having the same moral and ethical values, but having different views on what you think is going to be the most efficient and effective way to get there, and that's where your political difference comes from in terms of policy, I think you can do it if that's how the characters are. But if they have completely different values in terms of, what they think, if you can look at your idealized world, if you have the same end goal for what you think a good world would be like, but you just think there are different ways to get there, I think that could be done well. But if you have completely different views, if you're one of you's my idealized world is having whatever, if one person's my idealized world is having men and women in specific roles that they must adhere to, then I don't think that that's going to work because you have to have somebody then having to change themselves and give themselves up for the other person, and I don't think that makes as good of a romance. That's my thought on it, but I don't know. I'm interested what other people might think on that.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I not even necessarily politically, but when there's something that is that sort of divisive, I've never seen a nice meet in the middle. I don't think where one person hasn't had to dramatically shift one way or the other. I don't think is I think that can work too, but I've never seen a neutral, like you described. It'd be interesting though if we find anything.
Yeah, because when I tried writing one, the characters did have, the same, values toward each other. It was mostly just that they, disagreed. One of them was a capitalist, and one of them liked the Keynesian economic model. That's how I, wrote that. But they both, had the same views in terms of, how they should treat each other and things like that. Yeah. So, but So I think it really depends where the views are coming from. In this case, there's not really a lot of nuance to the discussion. It's really just she is a feminist and he is a Trump supporter. And it's right there saying that feminists and Trump supporters can't be the same. You can't, no feminists in the Trump camp allowed, which kind of goes against the I didn't find any sexists at the Trump rally if you're saying no feminists, so, but it's that's their difference, and they have different views on how how they should live their own life, then I'm thinking, okay, well maybe I don't know. This I don't find romantic because one of them has to completely change for the other one, and that's not cute. Yeah.
Well, because they're both such caricatures that they're both at these extreme ends of the political spectrum that they're writing about. It's super black and white. She does find a guy in a Democrats for Trump shirt at the rally, and she's like, oh, I'm a grad student and I'm a Democrat. Can I ask you some questions? He's like, oh yeah, ask away. And her first question is, so you voted for this guy? And he's just like, yep, bye. And he's like,
what a dumb question to ask at a Trump rally, dude. You're a grad student? Come on.
He said, like, ask away, go ahead. And then she asks him one thing and he's just like, yeah, whatever, bye. It's just like, wow. She got so seen there. And, oh, she's like, aren't you afraid of being called a racist? And he says, he throws back his head and laughs. And he says, if that's the worst thing I'm ever called, I'm doing pretty well. And I was like, that's really playing down what...
Not really. Yeah, being racist is pretty bad, dude.
There's way worse things. Like, that doesn't play as well as you think it does, dude.
I mean, I guess it would be worse to be called a serial killer if you're being called that accurately, but, like, no, being racist is pretty bad.
He's basically talking about Trump's tax break, you know, his tax scheme.
Yeah.
Which is what, like, a lot of people were in for, so it kind of makes sense for him to kind of go through this with her. And he's sort of saying, you know, the numbers are better, it's better for me and my family, so that's what, you know, that's what I go with. And she says, oh, numbers may not lie. And I just wrote, facts don't care about your feelings. So she basically admits in this bit, I found this quite fun as well, because she's like, well, yeah, he's right about the statistics here, but I hate him. And that's like the level of nuance that Ricky is.
Right, that's literally like, she's like a Ben Shapiro stereotype of someone you can go, oh my god, she ignores facts for feelings. It's the first page of chapter 3. Before we get into the God stuff, I want to talk about this line right here that I thought was like, again, I'm reading this assuming the author's being genuine in intention, in which case this feels very out of character if she was trying to write a realistic feminist. So it's like, Ricky bowed her head for the prayer and stared at the tips of her toes. She could not help but peer up at the two black women on stage. If Trump was a racist, if his supporters were racist, then why were these ladies given such a respected role? So it's talking about like how during the prayer there's like two black women being featured on stage. And I'm just thinking like, okay, Ricky is a graduate student in gender studies, and she had talked earlier in the book about how she wanted to talk about intersectionality. So if Ricky understands intersectionality as a concept, then understanding Trump putting two black women on stage would be like a very basic thing for her to understand. Like, she would not have the, like, if she were written realistically for this role, she wouldn't have this question. She would react instead and be like, oh, Trump's putting two black women on stage, but he's just trying to virtue signal, or like, he's just trying to use these as like, look, I can't be racist, I have a black friend, or whatever. Like, she would not be like, huh, I didn't know that Trump knew black people. Like, she wouldn't be so confused.
Those two women, I thought it was interesting. I thought this chapter was interesting because it's the actual, like, Trump sort of speech part of the rally that it starts with. And they use actual Trump talking points. And the two women are Diamond and Silk, the vloggers. I don't know if you know, if you've, like, seen any of their stuff.
Oh, no, I didn't know they were based on real people.
They're real women, yeah.
Oh, wow! So, okay, so this book, like, ties into the real world a little bit.
Yeah,
okay.
I find that really, like, kind of intriguing with this chapter specifically. I don't know much about elsewhere, but they, so they're, like, vloggers that endorsed a lot of Republicans and specifically Trump. They are very anti-Antifa. They've talked about they don't like the Black Lives Matter movement. They're very, like, they've appeared on Fox News a lot. They're very, like, yes, these black women agree with us, put them everywhere. You know, it's like a real, like, that kind of, like you say, it's like Ricky should have sort of noticed what was happening there. But, they had some, like, legal issues where it seemed like they might have been paid to attend some campaign events and all kinds of stuff. But, yeah, so they're, like, they've made a lot of videos for Republican Party members and things like that. So when they're just like, yeah, everybody loves them, we love these girls, and it's like because there's these two black women that are like, we don't like Black Lives Matter and stuff like this. So super interesting. Yeah, that's legit.
Yeah, so it's what's happening is Trump goes on stage and is like, let's have a prayer first. And the Diamond and Silk, the two women, go up on stage and they lead the crowd in prayer. And Ricky's just like, I wonder why Trump would invite black women to his rally if he were racist and sexist like everyone says. And it's like, come on, Ricky, you know, but you're a grad student. Like, I just got, like, she's just unrealistically written. We just got to deal with it. Like, you would know better than that, dude.
I also thought it's kind of like subjective. She says like how if they're racist, how could Trump give these two black women such an important role? And I kind of thought like being very, very briefly on stage to lead a prayer, it's kind of questionable how important a role that is. That kind of depends on your perspective.
Especially because Ricky is not portrayed as having any value in religion or in God. She even says earlier, she's like, where is it? She's like, she could not recall anyone on her side using God or things like that. So she's talking about like, God doesn't seem to have been that much of a big importance in her life, so why would she be like, oh my god, Trump must respect these women a lot if he's having them lead the prayer? It's like the prayer doesn't have any value to her. So I'm like, what? This doesn't make a lot of sense, like, logically.
So there's like bits of Trump's speech in this, and he's talking about fake news and stuff, and then he's talking about you know, his opponents, and he says Pocahontas and Sleepy Joe, and I'm like, so they've dedicated so much time in this book to being like, there's not a single racist anywhere, and then Trump uses like basically a racist nickname.
We show Trump being rude. He goes on stage and starts being an asshole immediately, and it's like, oh, okay. What I find really weird about this book is the whole idea is that, like, it's like the whole ladies first, and the whole, like, see, the Trump supporters are very respectful and, like, gentlemanly, and it's like, maybe you could have made that argument if you're talking about, like, Ronald Reagan supporters, or you're talking about, like, I don't know, George H.W. Bush supporters or something, but we're here talking about Trump. Like, he's very openly an asshole. His whole thing is like, I don't censor myself, I say it how it is, I'm gonna be a dick publicly, and the whole thing is about, like, how there needs to be more order and less being a dick publicly and things like that, and I'm like, but that kind of goes against Trump's whole message, which is that he is a dick publicly. That's his whole thing.
And specifically, like, respecting women. And Ricky even talks early on about, like, his whole grab him by the pussy thing, and like that stuff is never addressed. She's
like, yeah, I thought Trump was supposed to be this guy who grabbed women by the pussy, but it turns out he's actually really nice. And it's like, no, he still is that guy though, and Ricky knows that, so I'm like, wait, what? She just doesn't care anymore? She doesn't care that he's, like, a serial sexual harasser anymore? Which, like, I guess she could make the argument that, like, if this is in 2020, you can make the argument where she gets conflicted because, you know, Joe Biden's been accused of sexual harassment a lot, too. And it's like, now we're in a position where it's like, a lot of politicians disrespect women, and we could have a discussion about that. The book just doesn't go there. It's just, like, disrespecting women, who the fuck cares? Like, nobody. Just disrespect women all day, who cares?
Her views are just so shallow. Just one last point of this chapter, because this chapter closes out with her getting ready to leave the event, and she calls her roommate Karen.
Her roommate, whose name is Karen!
I was like, oh my god, Karen!
Yes, we love Karen!
Love you, Karen.
And they even make Karen a huge bitch just to, like, just to make it full circle. Her roommate is Karen. It's very interesting, I think, that when the Trump rally, like, fully begins at the end of chapter 3, like, when the rally's fully going on, how this book had, like, done so much work to portray Ricky's feminist organization as a cult, but then, and she's like, I bet Trump's group is gonna be a cult too, and then it literally, like, shows them being a cult, and, like, it doesn't, there's no commentary on that. It's like, the venue was filled with a rock concert, like, atmosphere, things like that, and then it was very interesting, too, how, like, the feminist sisterhood is anti-military. I get being anti-war, but, like, a lot of feminists I know have been in the military, and a lot of their cause is, like, getting more equal treatment for women in the military and things like that. And or a lot of people who are anti-military are not like, wow, the military's awful. It's more a discussion of, like, you know, the U.S. doesn't have a lot of good options for paying for college if you are not from a higher economic background. So a lot of times people go into the military to get their college covered, and it's an exploitative way that takes advantage of young people physically, and a lot of women end up getting assaulted and things like that. That's more the discussion that I see. It's not like, feminists hate the military. A lot of feminists I know are in the military. So I'm like, I don't understand where you're getting this idea from either. Yeah.
I think it's that trying to pigeonhole the left, but trying to tie that in with, like, a feminist culty group. And it's like, the discussions of like anti-war and anti-violence and problems with the military is not really, it's like a separate thing from feminism. So I felt like it was just trying to be like, oh, you know, this is the left. They hate them.
It's like the left is this way and the right is this way. So, I think if you're going to do a romance with people from different political backgrounds, you have to almost go from it from the perspective of like, both people on the right and the left are more complex than you think. And it almost kind of gets at that with the Democrats for Trump guy who's like, I checked out the numbers and it worked financially better for my family. Like, it starts to get at that there, but then like, for the most part, like, it's just like, it stereotypes the right just as much as, like, the right likes traditional values and strong men. And it's like, okay, so you're just, like, making your own side as much of a stereotype. And that's why I'm like, maybe this is a troll and that's why she doesn't care. Or maybe this person just doesn't think that that's a problem. I don't know.
It, like, stereotypes the right in the form of Mike, but then Mike doesn't ever learn anything.
Mike is just perfect. He's just a perfect man.
He's perfect from the start, and he has like one or two moments where he's like, I was a bit mean because I was grumpy, but apart from that, he changes absolutely nothing. It's purely Ricky being like, everything I've ever thought was completely wrong, I must change all of my views.
And she does it in like 2 days. Meanwhile,
it's so fast.
Mike is like, he's just a dick, and then his sister's like, you should actually read what Ricky writes. And then he reads it and he's like, wait, I'm in love with her. Also, Mike falls. We're gonna start chapter 4. Mike falls in love with Ricky. First of all, without having even talked to her, he falls in love with her like at the rally. I guess they'd encountered on the train. But
he falls in love with her on the train.
He falls in love with her with the green hair and the black lipstick and the black nail polish. And then later in the book, he's talking about how he thinks that version of her is disgusting and he likes her only natural version. And I'm like, but you were first attracted to her with the green hair and the lipstick. Like, you liked how she looked then, because that's why you were attracted to her in the first place. So what are you talking about, Mike? Maybe Mike is going through a sexual awakening, and he's realizing that he's a sub.
When she goes back to like her blonde and traditional, and he's like, oh yeah, that's the kind of woman I love. I'd like for them to get together, and it all falls apart because he's like, actually, I enjoyed the like aggressive feminist green hair person that I.
That's what seems like he likes. He's like, yeah, I like this aggressive woman, but I'm like, so you're attracted to her this way, but then you want to change her? Was he attracted to her because he sees her as like a challenge of someone to change? Because if so, that's like very toxic. Like, that's like abusive. Yeah, so I'm like, I don't know about that.
It could be interesting writing, but that's never addressed. That's never suggested.
It's never addressed. It seems more like a writing error. Like, it's like just a mistake, like a lack of continuity. Like, he's attracted to her at the beginning. It says he's talking about how he's in love with her just from watching her. Green hair, black lips, easy to pick out. Like, it says it right there that he likes that about her. And then later in the book, he's like, no, I don't like that about you. I like you better this way. It just, like, doesn't address it. I think the author just forgot, honestly.
It's really bizarre. So chapter 4 is the first chapter that we get kind of from Mike's perspective. Ever since their brief conversation, he saw her on the train. She insulted his grandfather's legacy, and he's like, damn, I'm in love with this bitch.
I'm in love with this bitch. She insults my grandpa, even though she didn't say anything about his grandpa. She doesn't want me to... She doesn't want to sit down. She's got hair and lips that I don't like, and I just want to fuck her. That's what Mike's thinking. But not before marriage. No P word before marriage.
No. He specifically has a man-sized crush on this pint-sized woman.
Oh, sorry. We have to emphasize the size difference. We cannot.
Pint-sized woman myself. I find this slightly perturbing and gross.
As a big man-sized woman who likes pint-sized women, I was even like,
This is weird. And so he's seen her. He's like, I love her, and then he watches over her. He just, like, follows her around.
Mike's a creep, dude.
He stalks her and just watches her, and then he, like, rationalizes this stalking by being like, oh, she's looking at her phone. She's clearly not alert to threats. Nobody else is gonna look after her. I will. And so he just, like, follows her out of the venue when she's trying to go home, and it's super weird. And then we get a tiny bit of a description of what Ricky looks like, and she is small, but with a strong build.
Don't know what that means.
And she has firm, well-shaped breasts.
We can't not. We have to make sure that we know that her titties are popping, because if she does not have mommy milkers, then Mike is not interested. He needs someone who's gonna nourish their babies into a supreme army.
I was just like, so this is from Mike's perspective as well. How does he know they're firm?
How does he know they're firm? Right from a distance, you can't tell that.
What does well-shaped? When I read well-shaped, I was like, so she's wearing a bra? Because what does that mean?
What does that mean?
What shape are they? He's like, I love
round. I'm
ovals.
guessing.
I love round.
I love when boobs are round. Mike has no thoughts in his head. He's very dumb.
He's not a smart guy. Well, he's a wholesome constructor dude. Okay?
Mike is a good man who does an honest day's work, and we can respect that about him, but he's also just like, boobs are round. This girl has round boobs. I want to protect her. He's very dumb.
Oh, bless him. Oh, okay. So this is where Antifa shows up. He's stalking. I always felt like this could go a different way if it was a different book. He's like stalking and following this woman that he's very briefly spoken to on a train, and somebody slams into him from behind, and I'm like, oh great, this is where they distract him so she can run away from the store. But no, it's Antifa, and he and the book keep describing them as punks. Like punks and anti-fascists are like this interchangeable thing, which I thought was very, as a British person where we have an actual decent history of what a punk is. I thought that was very weird and funny. So he gets into like a brawl with them. He like pulls some of their masks down, and then he's like fighting like 5 of them off at once, and he says it's like fighting his sister. It's so easy. He's just like,
these anti-fascist punks, they're all just little feminist women and little beta boys who are all little scrawny twinks, and I can snap them because I'm big with my big manly build.
He makes the book makes such a point of talking about these Antifa mobs, and this one as well, as having like bats and chains and violent weapons and being like ready to like set fires, but also they're just pushovers and really easy to beat in a fight.
Right.
Which is it?
I wrote this in the book. I wish that we'd gotten to see the because it's portraying Antifa as like black hooded figures with bandanas, and like they're got their baseball bats. They're ready to I would have rather seen that from Ricky's perspective, because I'm wondering what she thinks when you see that Ricky hates violence, and then it's like, oh, well, since the right and the left are so simplified in this book, and so apparently that's her side according to the book, so it's like, I would love to see what Ricky's reaction to that would be, to see the violence. Like, I'm wondering, but I'm like, no, I'm realizing that's too complex to delve into the character reaction, so we have to do it from Mike's perspective, and instead it could be like, I can beat them! I beat with my fists!
I beat them up! She turns into, like, the perfect, quiet, scared, vulnerable woman at this point, and it's like, she also just has no thoughts, head empty. She, like, doesn't analyze anything about what happened. She's just, like, scared and needs big man to protect. Like, that is the whole... That's her from this point on. She gets like kicked and goes down, like with like a horrifying scream, because one of these guys attacks her. So Mike like swoops in and clobbers them and grabs Ricky to like escape. And I just like, the scene goes on, and like Ricky is so compassionate and so caring. He wants to protect her, and I'm like, nobody thinks to like take her to the hospital or like get her checked over, because she got like kicked in the ribs. Yeah. And, like, clearly suffered a lot of pain. And it's like immediately after that, it's like it never happened.
At page 25, I made this note that said, Mike is terrifying. What the fuck? Because she's trying to get away now, and he's trying to force her into a car with him. And I'm like...
Oh my god, yes.
Okay, so I'm like, Mike, you are such a gentleman, yet you don't understand that it might be scary for a woman to just get into a car with a strange man she just met. And he's over here, she's like... So she says, I'm not going with you anywhere. He was getting pissed. So now this big man you've never met before is getting angry at you because you don't want to go. Huge man. And it says, he took her hand more firmly and kept running. So she's like, I'm not going with you. And he's like, I'm gonna grip you. I'm gonna physically force you to go with me. And you're small and have nothing you can do about it. It says she was dragging behind, protesting the punishing pace. He slowed to a fast walk. And then he's about to hoist her into the car. And she says no, And he says, no, what? And she says, I'm not going anywhere with you. And he says, do you know what you just escaped from? They get paid to do this. And I wrote, lol, what? Who's paying Antifa? I was like, lol, who's paying? What?
Oh, cool, he's a conspiracy nut too. Like, as if it wasn't scary enough. No, he's literally, like, so terrifying. But then, and she, like, resists this whole time. And then when he's finally like, okay, fine, I'll call you an Uber, that's when she's like, oh, actually, I will come with you and your friend in this van.
Right? I'm like, wait, what? Like, Ricky, you're about to get murdered and cut into pieces and eaten. What are you talking about?
Die, Ricky.
In the car, she's cold, so he puts his coat on her and he thinks, my grandpa would be proud. I'm like, yeah, your grandpa would be proud that you just abducted a woman and forced her into the car with you. I'm a little concerned about your grandpa.
So I wrote this as well. It's totally fetishizing female vulnerability. The more afraid she is, the more desperate she looks and like trembly she is physically, the happier he is.
He's just loving it.
To be a big masculine man.
He says, he keeps talking about how she looks orphaned. I'm like, I don't know what that means. Do you mean like a child who's lost their parents? Like, do you mean that literally? Like, she looks like a child?
I think so. This is my theory about this. I think that Mike has seen like a stage play of Oliver, and he's like, to him, an orphan is like, you know, it's like hundreds of years ago, and they've got dirt from the street and like soot from the chimneys all over their face because she's got her black makeup smeared, and that's why he's like, she just looks like an orphan. She looks like that musical I saw one time.
Yeah, he's like, she looks like an orphan. She looks like she needs love. He felt sympathy and protectiveness, even though she'd been an asshole on the train. I'm like, that's when you fell in love with her, first of all, so you like that about her. Yeah. And then she's like, you gave me this because you think I'm weak. And he says, well, at the moment, aren't you? Like, he's like loving that she's weak. He's like, yeah. Yes, I've got a weak woman that I forced into the car with me, and I am on top of the world as a big man. I'm like, Mike is scary, dude.
He's terrifying.
I wouldn't get in 10 feet of Mike.
He's like, you must be hungry. No? Coffee? We must have coffee. And it's like, dude, either take her to the hospital or take her home. She's had a terrifying time. She's upset.
You force this woman into a car. It is like, now that I've forced you into a car, I'm gonna force you to go out to eat with me. I'm like, dude, Mike, someone call the cops on Mike, please. Chapter 5, they go to the cafe together, and I wrote that while they're having coffee at the cafe, we once again emphasize how small Ricky is. Ricky is small and Mike is big, and we need to remember this. Ricky's hands were small. They barely fit around the cup. Like, she can barely pick up the coffee cup because her hands are so small. Their hands are small. They barely fit around the cup. A ring petite like her that is talking about her. She has a ring on, which is small, just like her, because she's small and has small hands, so she wears a small ring. And then Mike reaches over and just starts like touching her ring, and it's very creepy. And she's like, it used to belong to my grandma. And Mike's like, I have grandparents too.
He's like, I love grandmas.
I love grandmas, and I love that your hands can barely hold the coffee cup because you're so small.
The bit with her hands barely fit around the cup, I just put girl same. I'm like, I have tiny hands too.
I guess this is a big cup. I don't think I have small hands. I like how chapter 6 starts off with also yet another comparison of their size difference, in case we forgot.
Yeah.
If she were a different female, I love when people call women females, like we're doing some kind of like scientific analysis, like she is a female and I am selecting her for mating. Yeah. If she were a different female, he'd be holding her hand, he'd wrap it small and soft in his larger, rougher one. Just in case we forgot, she has small hands that can't lift a coffee cup, and he has big, manly hands.
So that's where they talk about the intersectionality conversation. He says, if you're intersectional for what? Being female with green hair and white. And I was like, okay, intersectionality is about like overlapping social categorizations like race, class, gender, not hair color. And then he's like, then I'm intersectional for white and male and Scottish, Swedish descent. And I'm just like, okay. The point of talking about intersectionality is to identify where marginalized groups are like more strongly discriminated against, like lesbian women experience higher levels of intimate partner violence, something like that.
It's supposed to be like the whole is greater than the sum of its parts kind of thing. So it's like, yeah, you can talk about discrimination for being a woman, discrimination for being black, discrimination for being gay, but then there's like specifically like if you are a black lesbian, you are also going to face like unique things within like the LGBT community and within like different social circles and things like that. And it's just kind of a discussion about like how specifically different, like it, honestly, it's a good thing because it's like a discussion of like, not all women are the same, not all lesbians are the same, not all whatever is the same. There's going to be a variety of different experiences and factors that play out into it, and that's what it's about. It's not, I am intersectional because of this. Like, that's not what it means.
I like, also, I'll get out of this, like, stupid coffee shop scene in a minute, but I like that he's like, so why did you give my seat away on the subway? And I was like, because you weren't sitting on it. Have you ever been on the subway?
Yeah.
It's busy. Nobody sat there. It's awkward. Like, time is passing. Like, somebody needs to sit there.
Yeah.
So that we can all move on with our lives, or everyone on the subway is going to be pissed off. They have this brief bit where she's, like, talking about her blog, and she's like, I bet you just watch Fox News or read Breitbart. And he's like, yep, love them. And it's like, okay, so we're just putting, like, far-right news outlets.
Yeah, here I thought maybe Mike would be like, yeah, I read those, but I also read a bunch of other places because I want to get a well-rounded worldview from multiple perspectives. If we're supposed to sympathize with Mike, but instead he's like, yeah, I like these sources only, and I close my mind off to other things, so yeah, actually, and so that's good.
Like, it's just contributing to how cliche they both are again.
Yeah.
Like, I only read, like, feminist blogs, and he's like, I only read far-right news.
And see, if maybe they both had to open their worldview and understand each other's perspective a little better, but Mike doesn't have to change anything. He's the man, so he's already perfect. And she has to give up everything so that she can have big, strong man hands gripping her well-shaped breasts. I like that in the next chapter, her makeup's running down her face, and she's like, oh my god, she's like running down her face because of the rain, and she's like, I look awful. And he says, you look like an orphan. It's cute. Mike has like a vulnerability fetish. He wants to be like the hero who fixes women. He thinks that that's hot or something.
Yeah, it's so strange. Oh, and she's like, well, my parents don't like a lot of makeup, so I gotta wash this off before I see them. And he's like, oh, you honor your father and mother? Like in the 10 Commandments? That's good. And I was like,
maybe she just doesn't want to get yelled at, dude.
I bet, like, you don't always follow the 10 Commandments, Mike, because, like, who cares? It's like, oh, you do that one. He only cares if it's parents or grandparents.
Right, he loves that. Here's the other thing I was confused about, too, is, like, so her parents are portrayed as being more conservative because they like to go hunting and they don't like when she dyes her hair, and they have this more like they like later in the book they talk to Mike and take his side, so they're shown to be on the more traditionalist side. So I'm wondering why Ricky is so confused every time she meets a conservative person, considering supposedly her dad's the same way. Like, why is she so confused about everything when apparently she grew up with a dad who had those views? And it's like, okay, wouldn't you have learned about where they came from him? Why are you confused every time you meet a conservative person and you're like, wow, I've never met one of these before? Like, yes, you have.
Because in this sort of chapter, he's starting to, like, actually think that her, like, hardcore feminist green hair, you know, persona is actually more of a facade.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like Ricky never sort of acknowledges or addresses that.
No, she's like, I'm gonna wash it out because I don't want my parents to yell at me.
Yeah.
And it's like, but then we never get that she's probably gonna put it back in the next day, but
yeah,
it's not really. Well, I think the message of the book is that dyeing your hair and wearing makeup is always a facade, because the real you is the way that God made you.
That's right.
Yeah.
And yeah, every time, so this is them, this chapter is them he's taking her to her parents' house.
Yeah.
Because she doesn't want to be on her own or whatever, because I think they're nearby, and also she's scared after the whole attack thing.
Uh-huh.
And every time she's like, I'm afraid, he's like, there she is, the real woman underneath. And it's like, being like scared isn't like the thing that makes you like actually a lovely woman. Like,
well, according to According to Mommy Maureen, author of The Secret Power of Femininity,
Yeah.
if you are a woman, showing sadness and fear is authentic. Showing anger is unattractive. You have to hide your anger, but if you show your fear and sadness, then you're being authentic and honest.
They do that in this book.
Yep.
They do that in this book. When
Yep.
years later, but she's like on the phone to him and she's like, I know it'll change his mind. I'll cry. So even though she's sort of putting it on, she's like, I'm kind of putting it on, but the tears were real, and so therefore it's real. And I'm like, what is that?
The idea, there's this weird idea that if women are sad or scared, then that's an authentic emotion. Even if they're doing it to manipulate someone, then it's still real. But if they're angry, then that's bad.
feminist brainwashing.
That's feminist brainwashing. Women don't ever feel anger naturally. That's not a natural emotion we're born with. We are feminists indoctrinate us with that.
We're born sad.
They put chemicals in the water and turn the women angry. It's the green hair dye. It's like seeping into her brain and making her. Green's the color of rage, man.
Oh man. I will say, to Mike's credit, at the end of this bit, when he's talking about like, why did you hesitate to get into the car with me? She's like, how did I know you weren't like a serial killer? And he's like, she had a point. And I was like, phew, at least he vaguely
For once, Mike is like, hey, okay, yeah, but he never has to, like, deal with that or anything. Guys, if you're enjoying this video, you're going to want to head over to Emma's channel, where on Wednesday, she is going to have part 2 up for this. And if you're watching this after the week that it's gone up, then it'll already be up there, and you won't even have to wait at all. So stay tuned for part 2, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts on everything we discussed in the comments below. In the meantime, keep on supporting small businesses and have a great Monday.
Get you some nuts.
There was lots of memes.
Makes me wonder if I should take up lesbianism.
Chicago.
You guys asked for it.